Welcome to Metaphysics of the Real. It is Monday, 5th of May, 2025, and this is your host, Oliver St. John. So fire is our guiding light. For this episode, we return to a new book, as yet unpublished, called Magick Here and Now. We begin with Alchemy, Stone of the Wise. Learned men and women with academic qualifications are no better than the common or garden, new age or online gurus, so-called, when it comes to construing the meaning of the Stone of the Wise, the secret of alchemy. This does not, it seems, stop anyone from pretending they know what it means, all the same. Worse still, these pundits and bloggers probably believe in all sincerity they really know the secret. The second part of this episode is concerned with cosmic mind and group mind, two things that are frequently confused today. The relatively modern notion of a group mind, a kind of collective mentality that no doubt owes something to popular psychological theories, is very mistaken when applied to initiation, unless the organizations concerned are pseudo-spiritual or even anti-spiritual. Metaphysics of the Real, Episode 8, Part 1, Alchemy, Stone of the Wise. The word alchemy is derived from the Arabic word alchemy. This refers to Kem, the Egyptian name for their land, and which means black land. The degradation of alchemy through separation from any spiritual principle is the origin of modern chemistry. The symbolism of alchemy has been misconstrued as physical or even psychological process. From the point of view of the corporeal state, that is to say, where we perceive ourselves as a mind attached to a body, alchemy certainly indicates a process taking place in time. But to limit it to the fractional degree of the subtle domain understood by psychologists reduces it to the ordinary life that we have spoken of at the beginning of episode 6, and that relegates alchemy to something of no real consequence at all. Alchemy is best understood as metaphysical symbolism and analogy, and by metaphysics here we mean pure knowledge, and not the abstraction that has become the conventional or dictionary meaning of the term. In alchemy, the great secret is called the Stone of the Wise, or the Stone of the Philosophers. There are many variations on the following texts, chosen here because the source is known. According to the 12th century Turba Philosophorum, the stone is a thing which is found everywhere, which is a stone and no stone. Contemptible, yet precious. Hidden, concealed, and yet known to everyone. It is a thing stronger and more sublime than all other things. In Gloria Mundi, 4 centuries later, this is put slightly differently. It is familiar to all men, young and old. It is found in the country, in the village, in the town, in all things created by God. Yet it is despised by everyone. No one prizes it, though next to the human soul it is the most beautiful and the most precious thing upon earth, and has the power to pull down kings and princes. The brevity of such texts is to be admired, and perhaps for that reason the aphorisms are sometimes called riddles. They require not a learned, that is a scholarly commentary, but an informed commentary, and even when such is available, the nature of the subject means that it will be met for the most part with incomprehension. When it is said that the stone is known to everyone, it would have been more accurate, but less pithy, to say that no person or creature could even have an existence without it, but it is seldom, if ever, realized. For this reason, it is also called contemptible, yet precious. It is common to all, yet only known through its countless adaptations, by names and forms, or nama and rupa, as it is termed in Sanskrit. It is a stone and no stone, because it is not a thing as such. It is not an object of mind, and for that reason is imperceptible, yet it illuminates all things, including the mind itself. It seems almost a shame to spoil all the fun people are having with this, and have done for centuries, no doubt. But the secret is that which Swami Vivekananda once described as an open secret. It is everywhere, but no one sees it. It is all those things that were said about it by the alchemists. In Advaita Vedanta, it is called the Self with a capital S, or Atma. It should be mentioned, the ruby stone, or elixir, as it is sometimes called, is likened to sulfur as inner active. We will come to the three principles of sulfur, mercury, and salt later. The ruby stone is sometimes said to be Christ himself. The Hermetic symbolism can be upwardly or downwardly transposed. When Atma is expressed as being, it is God. But it needs to be known that Atma, as the supreme principle, is one step beyond even God. God is Atma with name and form added. We have established then that the stone of the wise, by whichever names we might call it, is not the ego or human individuality, and is not the mind, which only knows objects of the senses. It is the source, that light of pure consciousness that is not produced, as some very deluded persons now think, from matter or neurons in the brain, but that is the real cause of the universe, and even then it is not a cause as such, but the human mind has always needed God to help reach what might otherwise be impossible to reach. Once God is abandoned, or is only paid lip service to, as is the case with so much of Western civilization today, the knowledge of the stone of the wise vanishes away altogether for those minds that have denied God in whatever name or form. For that reason also, it is said in the golden tractate of Hermes Trismegistus, "Understand, therefore, and accept this gift of God, which is hidden from the thoughtless world. In the caverns of the metals there is hidden the stone that is venerable, splendid in colour, a mine sublime, and an open sea. Behold, I have declared it unto thee. Give thanks to God, who teacheth thee this knowledge, for he in return recompenses the grateful." It would be labouring the point to go on insisting how this sublime stone that is not a stone is very difficult to acquire, that men and women will sometimes do yoga meditation and other practices for many years and still not get the direct knowledge called aparoksha in Sanskrit, certainly not in any permanent or stable way. But there are means, and our teachers are very resourceful. Even then, they are not a tiny fraction as resourceful as that one they give praises to, and encourage others to make offerings to. We can now look at the three primary alchemical principles of mercury, sulfur, and salt. You will have to listen carefully to this section to follow it, and try to picture the symbolism in your mind. Sulfur, usually depicted as a triangle with a cross below it, is the radiating force. Sulfur always transmits its rays outward from the centre, from within. It is centrifugal and has a correspondence with the will, so long as that is understood, for the purposes of the practice, in the sense of divine will or ordinance, which has nothing at all to do with the psychological or personal will determination. The symbol for alchemical mercury is almost identical to the astrological figure for the planet of the same name, except it usually has an arrow pointing downward instead of a cross below the circle and crescent. Mercury is as yin to the yang of sulfur. It is centripetal and is nearly always regarded as a reflective feminine or aqueous principle. Salt is symbolized by a circle with a horizontal line drawn across the middle, seeming to divide it into two hemispheres. Salt is body and is fixative or stabilizing. When we arrange these principles vertically, an interesting and useful symbol emerges. Sulfur is placed centrally, and we must remember it acts on the other two. Mercury is then at the top and salt at the bottom. There is an equation between salt and the square or cube. The symbol of sulfur is sometimes represented by a square or cube surmounted by a triangle or pyramid. In the early stages of the work, the active sulfur works on salt to produce the mercury. But in the later stages, once the first mercury has appeared, then sulfur works on mercury and creates the double mercury, which is also likened to the universal solvent or agent, the astral light. The final stage is then to fix the volatile, which brings salt into play once more through crystallization. This produces the philosophic stone, and simultaneously there is a return to the principial state, which is the goal of the great work. At this point, the listener might say, "Well, that is all well and good, but I still have no clue as to what is meant by mercury, sulfur, and salt. What are these?" We first have to dispense with the notion that they refer to the actual substances known to conventional science. The terms are symbolic. It is likewise with the metals of alchemy, although these have their counterparts in the gross domain. Gold equates to the sun, not the visible object in the sky, but spirit. Silver equates to the moon, which is the psyche or mind. Alchemical symbolism is also very flexible, and the terms used are never fixed to one thing. A boy and girl, or male and female, will often appear in illustrations, and these may variously equate to sulfur and mercury, Sol and Luna, or Mars and Venus, but none of these have exactly the same meaning. Sulfur is the inner active force of the being, and this means the integral being, not only the human individuality linked to a body and mind. Mercury is more or less equivalent to the astral light, or otherwise the astral plane, as termed by occultists since Eliphas Levi. This is really the whole subtle domain, which is in fact much more than merely the human psyche associated with the mentality. Salt, as has been said, forms a body through its fixative properties, and this can be extended to the whole of the individuality. Thus we have sulfur as transmissive, radiating, mercury as both fiery and aqueous, mutable and also a solvent, and salt as coagulating or fixing. These are not things like chemicals, they are elementary principles. While the Order of Golden Dawn and all occultists since have wanted to pin everything from no matter what tradition to the Tree of Life symbol, as if that would make it comprehensible, syncretism does not help. It leads to notable confusions. For example, the Golden Dawn placed mercury, sulfur and salt on the supernal triad of the Tree of Life, and from there equated these with the three gunas from Hinduism and the three mother letters from the Hebraic tradition. It would be as though any triad must be the same as any other triad. Some comparison might be made between these, but to think they are different symbols pointing to the same thing leads to the utmost confusion and no real knowledge. We have to work inside the traditions to gain comprehension of the symbolism, and while that does not mean becoming a Hindu monk or a Jewish rabbi, it does mean entering the matter from within, from a central place, not from without. Lest there be any misunderstanding, we should also make it clear that the method used by occultists has always been to use psychism, which rests on the quite fantastic prejudice that the traditions have nothing to tell us, and what we can invent through scrying or invoking spirits will give us superior knowledge. The Tree of Life, as a sort of filing cabinet, has limited value, and while such things as perfumes, plants and metals can be tucked away there in a way that can help with ritual magic of talismans and so forth, the principles of other traditions become reduced to nothing. For example, mercury, sulfur and salt, as corresponded to Keter, Hokmah and Bainar, the supernal triad, has almost no value at all. The alchemical triad is not a series of emanations or states of consciousness. Mercury, sulfur and salt are operative principles, and this makes a good deal of difference. As soon as we understand that the symbolism of alchemy is operative, not a cosmology, we can also see why it was a secret tradition, and still is, insofar as the real secrets are not ordinary knowledge or anything that can be put in a cipher, such as a language or alphabet, to be decoded by scholars. While the science of knowing God, or the Absolute directly, called gnosis by the Greeks, has been an open secret for thousands of years in India, it is embedded in the monastic traditions there and is the subject of the scriptures. That has sadly not been the case at all elsewhere. Much of what is taught and learned in Sanskrit and is treated there with utmost respect has been deemed heresy outside of India, and those who spoke or wrote of it too openly were put to death in horrible ways. The consequence is the loss of this great secret called the Stone of the Wise, through its total exclusion from religions that were once, more than 1,000 years ago now, its carriers. That knowledge was only written down in symbolism incomprehensible to the uninitiated. Nothing is known today of organizations that carried and transmitted this knowledge, but they must have existed, though by the word organizations is not meant in any way the institutional and so purely exoteric societies of the West. Many surviving alchemical manuscripts and even medieval grimoires include Egyptian hieroglyphs as well as various ancient languages, astrological symbols and so forth. Countless examples of what may have been the earliest origins of alchemy can be found in Egyptian papyri and on wall paintings and sarcophagi. Much of this has been collected together by the Egyptologists, who do not realize the irony in the title they give it, the Book of the Dead. Likewise, the ancient Greeks called the city that the Egyptians called City of the Living the Necropolis, City of the Dead. Among these collections is one held by the British Museum. It's attributed to a scribe, Hunifer, of the 19th dynasty and a steward of King Seti I. Here, Osiris is depicted as enthroned in an enclosure overseeing the Hall of Judgment. Hunifer has had his heart weighed against the feather of Mart, and it is found to be true. He passes the dread crocodile and has his name recorded in the Book of the Living by Jehuti, the scribe. He is then led by Horus to see Osiris. We might bear in mind also that this papyrus is said to be a ritual, and so the symbolism is therefore operative, as is that of alchemy. Osiris is depicted in pure white and can be equated with salt. Isis and Nephthys stand behind him and are the double Mercury, or astral light. Sulphur is here represented by the winged Eye of Ra, which carries the Shen ring of eternity, and also a long fan irradiating Osiris with the breath of life, which is also associated with Isis. Beneath the throne of Osiris is a rectangular lake depicting the waters of the Noon, or primordial deep. From this a lotus grows, and upon the flower the 4 children of Horus are seen to be standing, guardians of the elements of the body, and also equated with the 4 terrestrial directions. We can see from all this that alchemy, which came out of this latter phase of the development of ancient Egyptian knowledge, is primarily concerned with the prolongation of the life of the individuality in the celestial realms, called immortality. Through the fixing of the volatile, the whole essence of the individuality is preserved intact. Thus, the stone of the wise is also called the immortal stone in the context of alchemy. Insofar as the stone is Atma, as it is called in Sanskrit, which means the self transcendent of all individualities and all modifications of its light, which are merely adjunct to it, then the immortal stone is secondary to that, as it concerns worlds of manifestation or being, even if these happen to be superior to the human state considered as corporeal body and mind. The Hermetic symbolism is capable of upward transposition, however, and from the celestial realm, the Sanskrit Devaloka, the final liberation, moksha, is but one further step. We can also see from even this very light study of Osiris overseeing the judgment of souls how wrong it is to assume that Osiris, while clearly having a role that is passive in relation to the complementary pair of sulphur and mercury, is somehow inert. Furthermore, that the god of the underworld, as he is called, arises from a very partial, limited understanding of symbolism. We have admitted that the symbolism of alchemy indicates process, though not a physical or psychological one. It must appear as process from the point of view of the human state bound to time. In this respect, there is some relation between alchemy and the tantras, and Laya Yoga is quite rightly termed as inner alchemy. The qualification is only there because the false notion of alchemy as being no more than ancient experiments in something that can be likened to modern chemistry is very widespread. We will deal with the points that have been raised here. Firstly, alchemy is in no way an operation that is done for one time only, and neither does it only concern the posthumous state or transmigration of souls. The magnum opus is ongoing throughout the life of the practitioner. The process, so-called, will be seen by those whose eyes have been awakened to see subtle things, to keep repeating from start to finish, though never repeating itself absolutely. So far as the posthumous state is concerned, the symbolism of Osiris is not something that has happened to Osiris. It is what is happening to each soul constantly, or at least it appears that way from within the bounds of time and space. The soul is therefore led by Horus, the type of the initiate, to see Osiris, which is his self with a capital S, clothed in name and form. While the process or transformations will take place in the underworld or subtle domain, that realm is in no way limited to the narrow range of the human psyche. It is not the intention of the great work to get detained there, but to pass beyond its gates to the celestial realm, which is the influence brought to bear by the action of sulphur upon double mercury. If this were not so, then immortality would be impossible. Anyone that has understood what has been said here on the subject will know that possibility as true and most certain, and that there is more, much more, even beyond that. We will continue with cosmic mind and group mind after a short break. Metaphysics of the Real, Episode 8, Part 2. Cosmic Mind and Group Mind. The relatively modern notion of a group mind, a kind of collective mentality that no doubt owes something to popular psychological theories, is very mistaken when applied to initiation, unless the organizations are pseudo-spiritual or even anti-spiritual. Many of these groups now exist solely in the virtual world of electronic media, where any initiatic possibilities rest on total fantasy. Given the proliferation of such faulty knowledge, when a person that has sought knowledge from books and their own efforts makes contact with an authentic spiritual organization, fears may arise concerning this notion of a group mind. A hermetic order requires that members perform the same rituals and practices, often at the same time when we include seasonal and other observances. There is flexibility in teaching, however, as individuals have very different qualifications and requirements. It is needful to mention here that by qualifications, we do not mean those of the professional kind, or that can be acquired by attending a university. Very often such an education is an impediment to initiation, as it involves indoctrination through immersion in anti-spiritual values, once exclusive to the Western world, but now ubiquitous or global. The notion of group bonding, when applied to practices and observances held in common, is insidious, as it presupposes that a collective mentality, if such a thing can even exist beyond the level of mere habitual or automatic responses, is a desirable goal. If bonding is strictly limited to the individual level, it is counter-initiatic and no different in that respect than maintaining political or other affiliations, including all the various kinds of social or other activism that proliferate today. While the latter might seem worthy enough or even harmless to some, all such affiliations to causes act as a powerful means to confine the aspirant to the prison of mind, and indeed the minds of other people. An emotional bond is always formed between the individual and such an organization, however loosely defined, and unless this is relinquished, then maintaining the link is as good as being locked in a cell by a jailer who has thrown away the key. In a book called New Hermetica, Initiation and Metaphysical Reality, we said that the word egregor has been used to reduce and nullify all public knowledge of initiatic organizations through misunderstanding and confusion. Originally, egregor, derived from the Greek egregoros, wakeful, was associated with the watchers of the Enochian tradition. The listener may wish to refer to the Nephilim and sons of Anak in that same book, New Hermetica, for further on that subject. Far from being any kind of collective mind. The Watchers hint at the central mystery of initiation, which is concerned with knowledge derived from a suprahuman source. The meaning of the word egregor was later corrupted so that it came to mean only a kind of collective psychic entity. The meaning of egregor is by now so far removed from its original sense that the word is even used to describe the motivations, attitudes and opinions of a corporate body. With that, we have reached the bottom of the pit. Lest we flatter Satan by paying so much attention to him, let us swiftly move on to the real matter that is our subject of inquiry here. The idea, in the case of a spiritual organization, is not to form a group mind. The idea is to form a group of minds that is organized around a true principle, which may be symbolized in various ways. This is a very different matter altogether because we are not looking at a horizontal polarity, which can only serve to reinforce attachment and seal off the doors to spirit. We are looking at vertical polarity between a select group of minds with all their differences, and which takes place through what can be symbolized as an axial relation to the given sphere or domain. The higher principle is naturally given name and form, as metaphysical reality is out of reach of even the most spiritually inclined among us, at least at the outset, and usually for some long time, while such a thing as practice is even needed. It is worth mentioning here that even in those very rare cases where it might be said a person has reached a full spiritual enlightenment, practices such as devotion and meditation are continued. An order will therefore have a tutelary deity. In tantric cults, by which is not meant here anything exclusively Hindu or Buddhistic, the deity will be a form of the Shakti. It is traditional in the orthodox disciplines to deny that this has anything to do with magic. But the Shakti, even in those same traditions, is the holder of the ultimate cosmic power of the universe, which is to weave the worlds both inside and outside of time and space. It is not wrong to say this is the power of God as the great magician. Even Christianity, which has always sought to remove itself from anything that its followers like to think of as pagan, by which is really meant pre-religious practices, has a mother of God, which has preserved a link with the primordial wisdom. Maya, in whatever of her countless names she is known, is the producer of the appearance of things. This world illusion, as it is sometimes called, is without beginning or end, and is incomprehensible, therefore, to the minds of men. While Shakti is the producer of world illusion in this way, she also gives us liberation from illusion, leading us from unreality to reality, from darkness to light, and from death to immortality. She is able to do this through her very unique role of intermediary, which comes about precisely because she is the power behind the visible universe that deludes us into a mistaken idea of reality and of our true self. The intermediary realm, which arises from the ancient Greek conception of all things occupying the space between the earth and the moon, is often denigrated or hedged about with warnings. As it corresponds directly with the psychic realm, which is really the lower part of the whole subtle domain, the warnings are not without their use. I have to refer you to yet another of my books here. The subtle domain includes the psyche but extends to the higher intellect, and by intellect is not meant here the conventional meaning of that, which does not extend beyond the mentality. See Metamorphosis, Hermetic Science and Yoga Power, page 106. In the following invocation from our book Ritual Magic, it is Hecate herself that, while hidden in the depth of night as a scourge against the profane, leads the initiate to the intelligible light. Stoop not down to the darkly splendid world, wherein Hecate continually hideth in mysterious depths, sinuous and naked, with pleasure alluring, ever espousing the beauty of form. The illimitable dimensions of space are numberless, unfigured, concealing truth from mortal gaze. Arise, therefore, with the light-seeing eye of dawn. It is not our intention here to go far into comment on ancient texts, however. Let us look instead at how this works out in a hermetic order here and now, even in the great darkness of this present and last age of Kali Yuga. Members of such an order are aware of the natural, seasonal, and other cycles in time, as they observe them constantly with rites and meditation. It might be worth mentioning again that this is not about forming a group mind. It is a group of minds formed about a higher, suprahuman principle. There are, however, other cycles, very subtle and not necessarily pinned to the seasons, that are only observed by the members of such a group that have developed their sensory range well beyond the average, which in today's world is very limited and much reduced from what it was in ancient times. In that case, the cause of any cyclical change can be attributed to the Shakti herself, given that the order has a tutelary deity. This is not to rule out that in some rare cases the human governors or elders of an organization might deliberately invoke and set in motion forces, for example, to support the goal of initiatic transmission. If the operators are capable of doing that effectively, then they also know that the real power does not reside with themselves personally. For example, a priest does not perform the Mass in his own name. The Shakti is in every way the saviour, sotira in the Greek, which the latter attributed especially to Hecate. As we have said, she is able to do this by virtue of her special role as intermediary. The intermediary realm includes the human psyche and dreaming state. On what might be called the magical plane, which is where phenomena occur as perceptible, the Shakti has supreme power. She does not only minister to the needs of individuals, she can minister to the needs of a spiritual group. How does this come about? When there is a spiritual influence, the first port of call, so to speak, is the intermediary realm or abode of the psyche. Such an effect is not spiritual in itself, but comes about owing to the presence of a spiritual influence. In fact, even supernatural occurrences might come about in the same way that the magical powers do through the practice of Raja Yoga, even when there is no desire for such a result on the behalf of the practitioner. All such phenomena are in the realm of the perceptible, whereas metaphysical reality or direct knowledge of the self as Atma, one without a second, or that which is called the stone of the wise in alchemical texts, is not. While such signs are in no way an indicator of the goal of the work having been reached, so long as the recipient is not blown off course by imagining that is so, then such experiences, encountered in the dreaming state or in some other way, may be taken as encouragement. And such encouragement is certainly needed, especially in times when the path seems arid, somewhat like the Red Sea, where the density of salt forbids the existence of fish or other creatures. In reality, the path is not really arid. It is that the mind of the practitioner, so accustomed to sensation and stupefying pastimes that create engrossment in emptiness, giving temporary pleasure without satisfaction to the heart, puts up opposition to the practice. If that fails, then the body is more than capable of seizing the attention of the mind that is spiritually weak with ailments. Thus, the Advaitin practice, which applies to any spiritual path, no matter what, is to repeat, I am not this body, I am not this mind, until the idea even if not fully understood, is well ingrained, and it will become effective in time because it happens to be true. Some experiences brought about in this way, especially if the art of the divine Shakti is seen to be the agency, are more than encouragement, as they can teach us the veridicality of the scriptures and knowledge texts, proving them, so to speak, in the same way that Raja Yoga, by bringing about more or less extraordinary states, such as samadhi, can put an end to all the doubts of the practitioner forever. It remains for something to be said about positive and negative members of an order, such as has been described here. An order, by which is meant here a spiritual organization, in relation to its human members, is akin to a macrocosm in relation to a microcosm. Such a spiritual order reaches from the heights to the depths, and when considering this, we always take a moment to recollect that no less than Christ is considered to be a member of the order of Melchizedek, that is, the cosmic order. The members can be positive or negative in relation to the order that they truly are a part of, relatively speaking, owing to the constitution of their interior being. The relation of a being to its environment can be understood through the symbolism of the three principles of alchemy. Sulfur is the inner active core of the being, radiating outwardly. It has a certain relation with will, so long as we posit this in the sense of divine will, and not the inferior and wholly contingent or partial will as understood by modern psychology. Mercury is passive and inward turning, though at the same time the most outward part of the being compared to its inner nature. Through the action of sulfur upon Mercury, salt comes about, which is body from a certain perspective, through crystallization. By a rudimentary geometric analogy, sulfur is the vertical bar of a cross, where Mercury is the horizontal bar, and salt is the circle formed with that bar as its horizontal axis. Mercury is sensitive to the environment, and this includes corporeal and non-corporeal or subtle influences. At the same time, sulfur, the inner active being, exerts an influence on that environment. Thus, while it can seem as if a person is shaped by astral or starry influences, for example, in reality that astral environment is as much determined by the inner active being, which builds a body from that environment for its manifestation. If all of this has been followed so far, then it will be seen that the symbolism utilized depicts what is termed in alchemy double Mercury, likened to the caduceus where two serpents of active and passive force are entwined about a central axis. So as to be quite clear, the being is not only influenced by its environment, it is also the creator of that environment. Thus, man has an influence, and not only a physical one, on the cosmological environment. Now we can return to the matter of positive and negative members of an order. The positive member is more or less perfectly aligned through the interactive core of their being with the transmissive current of the order, always radiating outwards. As with an iron bar placed in a furnace, they will need constant reheating, so to speak, through contact, seasonal and other observances. The positive member is a near-perfect microcosm of the macrocosm when the analogy is understood. The sulfur works upon their Mercury, and in this way a new heaven and a new earth is formed, otherwise called a great work. The cube surmounted by a pyramid is an apt symbol, as is the Sphinx of Egypt. Looked at one way, the order in its earthly manifestation is their perfect, most suitable environment, so as to fulfill all the possibilities that are latent within them. Looked at another way, the order has come about as a consequence of their very integral nature, and this is why it is sometimes said that a true member of an order can never leave it. How can we leave ourself? Negative members of an order are members as much as the positive ones, but owing to complex factors such as karma and environmental influences that include such things as metempsychosis, they may exhibit antagonism to the teaching and methods, and may even seem to be completely immune to any initiatic transmission. For metempsychosis, which is a whole subject in itself, see my book Metamorphosis, Hermetic Science and Yoga Power, Reincarnationism. The immediate microcosmic environment of the negative member has formed a hard shell resistant to spiritual influence. This will still be the case even if they pursue other paths or traditions, and so they may hop from one to another, but as they work continuously as outsiders, none of it bears fruit. In fact, if the negative members were wholly antagonistic to the teaching or other aspects of the manifest order, they could hardly be members at all. It is more the case that, owing to their extreme passivity to their environment, which has created, in a manner of speaking, a thick cloud about their inner active core, there is a real confusion, a kind of inherent dualism in their own nature. They are members of the order, but they do not see it or feel it in any way directly, and yet they are drawn back to it time and time again. It would be as if a person was born into a family with parents, brothers and sisters, and more distant relatives, along with a heredity consisting of physical and psychic factors, but they suffer a kind of amnesia, so they feel no real kinship with anyone, to the extent they remain estranged to all intents and purposes. In this case, no direct action can be taken by representatives of the order to bring them into the fold, so to speak. It is for the individual to recognize their true immortal heritage. In the moment this realization is attained, they will also realize something concerning their own true nature. Thus, they will have succeeded in gaining the first of the lesser and greater initiations. That brings episode 8 of Metaphysics of the Real to a close. The music I played on guitar and other instruments is called Alchemy 0, and I composed it especially for this program. Thank you for your attention. Sophia be with us forever.